Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Michael, and I'm exploring all the different ways that stationery can bring me joy. I'm really excited to have you come along with me today and showcase the inks that I have currently inked in my pens for the fall. I love watching currently inked videos on YouTube. After some of the planning videos from Helen at the Coffee Monster Co., they were videos that really grabbed my attention, and I fell into the fountain pen world pretty quickly. All of the different colors and types of inks are just so lovely, and I am excited to be able to start this tradition of what my pens will be inked with. I know some people do currently inked every month, and I don't think that I will be switching my inks that frequently, but I thought maybe doing a seasonal kind of shift would be nice. I tend to write in my journal, mostly with my fountain pens, and I like to, use two colors in my spreads, one for kind of titles or highlights, and one for the main writing. And I kind of cycle through a lot of the different pens as I write in my journal every day. And so I thought it would be fun to set up some new colors, some old colors that I was using in new pens, and create a new system for myself for the fall. The first thing that I had to do was kind of get into fountain pen care. I had been buying, some affordable dupes of some more famous pens. I got some Twisbees, I got myself some Lammies, Kaweco, the starter pack, if you will. And because I had been building pen by pen and adding different inks, I had a lot of pens that were inked, and I realized I wasn't actually using all of them. Some dried out, some, their ink ran out, but I didn't necessarily clean them right away, and I had to kind of reflect on the fact that I wasn't caring for my pens as well as I could have. So I took out my collection, I watched some tutorials on how to properly clean the pens, and I went to town on cleaning almost my entire collection, minus a few pens that had a lot of ink still left in them. I then sat down and thought, which of these pens do I really love using? Put those aside. Which pens do I not use as much? And I decided not to ink those up this go around. Later, I probably have to have a reflective conversation with myself about whether I want to keep some of these pens or destash them. And then I started thinking about what color palette or what colors I want to use in the fall. And what was really interesting is, at this time while I was kind of thinking about this, I had been looking up different ways to think about color patterns, color combinations. I was watching other creators currently inked, and I came across this book where there were kind of like different color combinations set up in the book, and I thought, oh, that'd be really, really nice. And I kid you not, like, the universe, I think, sometimes really aligns. My friend and coworker came and said, this got delivered to my apartment, and it wasn't for me, and I asked around, and it didn't belong to anybody else, and so I brought it to school to see if anybody would want it, and I was like, I was literally looking at this online, how serendipitous, and she was like, great, I hope that you can use it. And so this is the Dictionary of Color Combinations. I believe it's based off of the work of someone called Sanzo Wada. Originally, it was like a 6-volume edition of color combinations that were made from 1933 to 1944, and they kind of pared it down into this 2-volume set. And this person, Sanzo Wada, was kind of one of the early people to think about color and color combinations. And I had seen this in some of the TikToks and YouTubes that I had been into, and I thought this would be so lovely as kind of like a guide to picking color combinations for the fountain pen colors that I use. I also think, just in thinking about ephemera or colors and spreads, what's interesting about the book is that it's kind of organized by pairs of colors that go well together, then trios or triads of colors, then you get into 4 color combinations, and then in the back you can look up by color, and then it'll give you the different combinations that include that color. And this is kind of how I started thinking about my ink colors for the fall, because there were some pens, like I said earlier, that I didn't empty because they had a lot of ink, and I found the color that best matched and then looked at the combinations that kind of went with it. I think it's also fun, they give you these little swatches in the back, and you can cut these out and play around with them to create different combinations of your own, which is kind of fun. But yeah, so with this book in hand, I started kind of creating a color palette for myself. One of the colors that I have that I left inked in this TWSBI Eco is Sailor's Afternoon Tea, and I thought it kind of looked closer to this apricot orange color, and so I built a 4 color combination off of this, where I have this color and then this reddish color, this porcelain green, and as close as I could get to this brown to create this. And then the other pen that I left inked was my Kaweco Student, and that had inside of it Yoseka Stationery's like Origin #1 green ink, and I thought that that was closest to this dull Viridian green, and so I created a combination to match this. And I think they both kind of give like a fall vibe, if not like a 1970s fall vibe. So I'm excited to explore these 2 combinations. And so, for my first currently inked, I wanted to think about how to capture that information in my notebook. I have a ink journal that I have featured on this channel in the past. And in this ink journal is where I have my swatches of the bottles that I own. I have a place where I am now putting my ink samples, and then I'm also kind of in the back creating an area where I'm writing down inks that I actually want to get samples for. And before the samples, I have an area where I've drawn every fountain pen that I have, and I'm keeping a log of what ink has been inside of it. And I immediately thought, okay, well, this is going to go in my ink journal, but then I realized I've kind of filled out the sections pretty full at this point, especially if I want to save space for inks to come, that for my currently inked, if I'm going to be switching it up every quarter or every, big season, I need an area where that's going to live. And so I obviously thought about my stationery journal, which is now in this Traveler's Notebook and Blackwing collab journal. I have my Yoseka Stationery insert, which is my stationery journal, and I thought, okay, so I have put some swatches in here already at some points when I've purchased some inks or done some swatch tests, so maybe my currently inked obviously could go in here as well, since it is a chronological journal. And I thought, well, how am I going to do it? Am I going to just swatch each ink, kind of going down the side and just write the title? But that felt so similar to my, ink log in my ink journal. And I had recently seen a video by Micah from the Cat Collage Club, or she's the artist who owns the Cat Collage Club. I'll link, her, or I'll tag her and put a photo of her YouTube channel here, and she did this lovely spread of swatching inks, but then painting these fall leaves that I thought was like so beautiful. And then I also watched a currently inked video from Jackalope Journals. I'll tag them and put their image here as well, and they also had a leaf spread, and I was just like obsessed. And you know, imitation is the highest form of flattery. So I was like, well, I'm going to do leaves as well. And I thought how I would do it. And so I thought back to the Heartstopper graphic novel, and one of the motifs that you see in the graphic novel that they then pulled into the show that was on Netflix were these colorful leaves. I believe yes. So my commonplace journal has these leaves. I bought this sticker that has the leaves on it. And I thought, okay, well, these are leaves that I really enjoy. I like the series a lot. So perhaps I can kind of create my own version. So I Googled some images of the leaves, and I took out this craft paper post-it block that I have, and I tried to look at the images and kind of sketch my own versions of them. These are obviously some of the not chosen versions, but I was kind of getting the hang of it. And from the ones that I really enjoyed, I then outlined them using a thicker permanent marker. I believe I used this Muji oil-based permanent marker in black, and I used the thicker tip to outline these leaves, and then I cut them out. These are the 4 that made the cut, because I have 2 4-color combinations that I'm going to be inking, or I have inked my pens with. And then with these 4, I use them almost like a stencil. I put them underneath the page, and using my Unipin Fine Line, which is a water and fade-proof pigment ink. I think I used the 0.8 millimeter version. I then traced my little templates that I created for myself. And so with all of that, I have my currently inked for fall leaves kind of put out here to ink up. And so again, I want to thank Micah and Jackalope Journals for the inspiration. And so I am so excited to have you join me as I swatch the inks in these leaves. I'm also going to write the name of the ink in the ink next to it. And to do that, I am using a dip pen. Ignore the random spoon, that is for ink swatching. And I'm going to probably do this in there's fine, medium, this is my feud, I think. Let's go with a medium. So I have my medium dip pen that I'm going to use. This is the Sailor Horoco Dip Pen. I'll make sure to correct myself there. I have some paint brushes. I have a set here. These are just student grade paint brushes. I have droppers to put a drop of the ink and then use the paintbrush. And yeah, I have everything here set up. So without further ado, we can get started. In thinking about these color combinations, this first one, which is using the green as the jumping off point, which is this Yoseka Stationery Origin number 1 green. I then thought about what colors I have that closely match these, and so for this orange, I am using this sample of Lennon Toolbar's Bitter Orange Tea. This tan, I'm going to be using a custom ink that I made at the Tono and Limbs event that I went to. And I was going to go with a black, but I actually wanted to use the Diatramentus Archive ink that I have, and that's more of a gray, but I think that's okay. So let's get into it. So I just jumped in right away, put some ink on the page, and immediately regretted it. This paper was soaking this ink up. It was so dry. It was not painting properly. This first green leaf did not look the way that I wanted it to. And I'm not gonna lie, I almost gave up right here, but I reminded myself that perfection isn't the point. I'm just having fun with ink. And even if it doesn't look the way that I want it to, it's still good practice to hopefully get to the place where it will look the way I want it to later. I was reminded of Jake from Adventure Time, who said, sucking at something is the first step towards being sort of good at something. And I realized that if I didn't keep practicing, there was no way that I would even get to the point where I would be able to use ink in this way, the way I would want to. So I kept going. The Lennon toolbar looks really lovely. It's a very vibrant orange. I'm really excited to have that in a pen. I put on my custom ink that was color matched to my grandpa's handkerchief, and it came out a lot darker on this page than I had intended, and it's a little splotchy. There's a lot of interesting shading happening with some of these inks, even if I'm not necessarily putting the ink as best as I can on the paper. As I move into the Diatramentus, it also didn't quite turn out the way that I wanted, but I realized that I shouldn't be putting drops directly on the page, and I started to use the brush to get the ink out of the dropper, which then made me realize for the next page that maybe I need to use a palette of some kind to put the drop of ink on, because directly on the paper was not allowing me to paint the way that I wanted. So yeah, I think, overall, decent. All right, so there's our first 4-color combination. Really interested to see how this looks in the writing. I think when I'm using the dip pen, you can kind of see more true to what that will look like. But I do think that the 4 colors do complement each other well. And I'm excited to see what it looks like in my journal. So again, here is the color combo for reference. And actually, let me take post it off so you can see it a little better, and the 4 inks there. Alright, so let's move on to the next one. So for this next set of 4, the ink that I had already, as I mentioned, was this afternoon tea. So let's start with that one here at the top to kind of represent that apricot orange. Moving into this next 4, I learned my lesson from the first page and used the dropper to put the ink on a plastic palette of sorts that I created to be able to dip my pen or brush and paint from there. This Sailor Afternoon Tea looks stunning. The shading in this ink and the sheening is gorgeous, and it comes out on this page. And it's the perfect match for this apricot orange in the guidebook that I was using. I move on to what's supposed to be a brick red, so I have Diamine Ink's Oxblood, which is the closest I have to a brick red. Also, the shading in this ink is lovely. It makes a really nice leaf. I'm definitely getting more into the swing of how to make this happen. The color combo calls for kind of a emerald pearlescent green, and so I have this Tono & Limbs Yoseka Moss that I got at the Tono & Limbs event, and it's a very dry ink. The page soaks it up. It's looking a little splotchy, but the color does match. In the pen that I have it inked in, it writes pretty light, so I think it's just kind of a light color. The color combo asks for a very dark brown, and I don't have a dark brown ink. I have this Antigua ink in the color Toffee, which is more of a caramel brown, but it definitely is a beautiful brown, and I think it matches this set well. I also realized that I have my Kaweco Orangina pen, and I bought a bold nib for it because I wanted to use this shimmer ink called Honey Don't Worry from Tono & Limbs, so I'm painting the word fall with that ink to represent this one pen that I am trying out shimmer inks with, and I'm really excited to see how that goes. Alright, I'm going to let this dry and then I'll come back for some close-ups. Alright, so hopefully I'm centering this properly, but you can see here the Yoseka Origin number 1, the Lennon toolbar, bitter orange tea, my custom ink, and the Diatramentis archive. And then this combo, Sailor Afternoon Tea, the Diamine Oxblood, Tono and Limbs Yoseka Moss, and the Antigua Toffee. I think you can kind of see the shimmer, yeah, in that Honey Don't Worry. So, I've had a lot of fun trying to match this color combination with my inks and the correct one for this color combination with my inks. I really love this book, and I'm excited to let it inspire me for the winter inks that maybe I want to work with. And so thinking of myself going into cooler tones, what are some combinations that might be great for the winter? And I can use this as a way to inspire me of what samples to get. The last thing that I need to do is take this and log which pens now have this ink in my pen log. And so I thought to bring you along for the ride. Alright, and with that, I have completed my ink swatches, my currently inked for the fall. I hope that you have enjoyed looking at these 8 different inks. Which of these is your favorite? Please let me know in the comments. Do you own or have samples of any of these inks, and do you really love them? I would love to know. What colors scream fall to you? What inks do you love using in the fall? Please join me in the comments and we can get that conversation going. I'm always looking for a suggestion for a new ink, especially now that I've gotten into getting samples. So I would love to know what your favorites are. As always, I appreciate you being here. I hope that you have a great rest of your day, whether there's many hours ahead of it for you or you are watching this right before you lay your head down for the day. I hope whatever amount of the day you have left is great, and that you keep exploring the possibilities that a blank page presents you. Until next time, have a lovely one. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.